There are moments in life when our strength runs out, when our prayers feel like whispers lost in the wind, when every effort seems to fall short and the mountain in front of us looks too high to climb. It's in those moments that heaven whispers, "When you can't, I still can." When we look back through the pages of Scripture, we find a God who steps in exactly when man reaches his limit. Abraham could not produce a son in his old age, yet God said, "I still can." Moses could not part the sea, but God said, "Stretch out your hand, I still can." Daniel could not stop the lions, but God shut their mouths and whispered, "I still can." The same power that acted then is alive now. God has not changed. His hand is not shortened. His mercy is not exhausted. Sometimes we think faith means doing everything right, having no fear, no doubt, no hesitation. But true faith begins when we realize that even when we can't, God still can. The moment we come to the end of our strength is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of His glory. Our weakness becomes the stage for His power. Our failure becomes the soil where His grace grows. When I look at my own life, I can remember times when I said, "Lord, I can't take another step. The pain was too deep, the pressure too heavy, the path too uncertain." Yet in the silence I heard Him whisper, "You can't, but I can." And somehow He carried me. Not because I was strong, but because He is faithful. Not because I was deserving, but because His love never fails. You may be standing right now in a place where you've done everything you know to do. You've prayed, you've tried, you've waited. And still, nothing seems to change. Let me tell you something. God is not waiting for you to impress Him with your effort. He's waiting for you to trust Him with your heart. He moves when we surrender, not when we strive. He performs the impossible when we stop pretending to be capable on our own. Faith is not the absence of struggle. It's the decision to trust in the midst of it. When Peter walked on water, he didn't do it because he was superhuman. He did it because Jesus said, "Come." And the moment Peter looked away from Jesus and saw the waves, he began to sink. But even then, Jesus didn't let him drown. When Peter couldn't, Jesus still could. That's the picture of our walk with God. We stumble, we doubt, we fail, but His grace pulls us up again. When life presses in on every side, when the night seems too long and your prayers seem unanswered, remember, God does not stop being God because your circumstances look impossible. The Red Sea was impossible. The walls of Jericho were impossible. The cross was impossible. Yet every impossibility became a testimony of His unstoppable power. What seems hopeless to you is only an opportunity for Him to show His strength. Some of you have prayed for years for a breakthrough. In your health, in your family, in your ministry. You've wept, fasted, and believed, and it feels like heaven is silent. But delay is not denial. God is working behind the scenes, arranging things you can't see, preparing outcomes beyond your imagination. When you can't see the way, trust that He still can make one. When you can't fix the problem, trust that He still can redeem it. The reason God allows us to reach the end of ourselves is so that we will finally see the beginning of Him. He strips away our self-confidence to give us God-confidence. He takes what's broken and breathes new life into it. The power of resurrection comes only after the cross. So if you feel buried today, remember, seeds are buried too, but they rise again with new life. Sometimes we think faith means always feeling strong, but faith is often forged in tears. It's built in the dark when no one sees you. It's strengthened when everything in you says, "It's over." Yet something deeper whispers, "God still can." Every giant you face is smaller than the God who lives in you. Every storm you walk through still listens to His voice. Every closed door still bows to His authority. When the woman with the issue of blood reached out and touched Jesus' garment, she was at her end. Doctors couldn't help. People had given up on her. But her faith said, "If I can just touch Him." And when she couldn't heal herself, He still could. That's the heart of the gospel. Our inability meets His ability. Our weakness meets His power. Our emptiness meets His fullness. There is no place too deep that His love cannot reach. No sin too heavy that His blood cannot cleanse. No failure too final that His grace cannot restore. You may say, "Lord, I can't forgive." But He says, "I still can." You may say, "I can't go on." But He says, "I still can carry you." You may say, "I can't find purpose." But He says, "I still can turn your pain into purpose." Or God specializes in impossibilities. He delights in doing what no man can do so that no man can take the credit. When Gideon's army was too large, God reduced it to 300 men so that everyone would know the victory was his. When Lazarus had been dead 4 days, Jesus waited even longer to show that no grave can stop his glory. When Paul's thorn would not leave, God said, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." That means your weakness is not your defeat, it's your doorway to divine strength. When you say, "Lord, I can't," heaven responds, "I still can." That is the secret of a surrendered life, not relying on what you can do, but resting in what he already has done. And many of us live weary because we are trying to do in our own power what only God can accomplish by his Spirit. We try to fix people, solve problems, control outcomes, and carry burdens that were never ours to bear. But the Lord says, "Cast your cares on me, for I care for you." When you place it in his hands, you free your heart from fear. When you trust his timing, you release the anxiety that tries to consume you. Sometimes God waits until we finally stop striving, because as long as we are still trying to prove we can, we never give him the space to show that he still can. He is not limited by your ability, your background, or your past. He is not waiting for perfect people. He is looking for surrendered hearts. When you let go, he steps in. When you fall, he lifts you up. When you are weak, he becomes your strength. Every trial you face today carries a whisper of grace. "You can't, but I still can." Every sleepless night, every unanswered prayer, every painful waiting season, they all lead you to a deeper revelation of who he is. And when you finally see that it was never about what you could do, but what he could do through you, peace floods your soul. Because at the end of every broken road, at the bottom of every shattered dream, stands a faithful God who never fails. And his voice still echoes through eternity. When you can't, I still can. There are times when we walk through life and everything seems to fall apart piece by piece. The dreams we once held close begin to slip through our fingers, and no matter how hard we try, nothing works the way we imagined. We cry out to God, wondering why he seems silent, why our prayers bounce back like echoes. But it's often in the silence that he speaks the loudest. It's in the stillness of surrender that his power begins to move. When we are out of answers, out of options, out of strength, he says, "Now I can show you what I can do." When you can't, he still can. God has a way of bringing beauty out of brokenness. He takes the fragments of your life, the moments you thought were wasted, the tears you thought were meaningless, and he turns them into a masterpiece. He doesn't need perfect conditions to work miracles. He works best in the impossible. Think about it. When there was no light, he spoke it into being. When there was no path through the Red Sea, he made one. When there was no hope in the tomb, he rolled the stone away. God doesn't wait for the situation to be right. His word makes it right. You might be facing something that feels like the end. Maybe it's a relationship that's crumbled, a dream that's died, or a sickness that's drained your strength. You've tried everything, prayed every prayer, and it feels like you're standing in front of a wall too tall to climb. But that's exactly where God begins. When your hands fall in exhaustion, his hands take over. When your heart says, "I can't go any further," his Spirit whispers, "I will carry you." So many of us have been taught that faith is about doing, about proving, about striving to please God. But true faith is resting in his ability, not ours. It's knowing that even when you have nothing left to give, he's still more than enough. When the Israelites faced the Red Sea, they had no weapons, no plan, no escape. All Moses could do was lift his staff, a simple act of obedience, and God did the rest. The sea parted, not because Moses was powerful, because God was faithful. And he hasn't changed. The same God who parted the waters, who fed the 5,000, who raised Lazarus from the grave, is the same God who walks with you today. He still heals, still delivers, still provides. Your weakness doesn't limit him. Your surrender releases him. When you say, "Lord, I can't fix this," that's when he says, "Now I will show you what I can do." Sometimes God allows us to reach the point of impossibility because he wants to reveal himself in ways we've never seen before. If everything always worked according to our strength, we would never truly know his. It's only in the dark that light shines the brightest. It's only in the storm that we learn the power of peace. When the disciples panicked in the boat, Jesus wasn't worried. The waves didn't scare him. He stood and rebuked the wind because creation still knows the voice of its creator. And that same voice still speaks over your chaos today. Be still. There are moments when faith doesn't feel glorious. It feels heavy, quiet, hidden. You're praying and nothing seems to happen. You're believing and everything still hurts. But faith isn't proven in comfort. It's proven in endurance. When you keep standing even when you want to collapse, when you keep praying even when heaven seems silent, that's faith in action. You may not see the answer yet, but God is working in the unseen. He is building something behind the curtain of your pain. We often measure God's presence by what we can see or feel, but His power isn't dependent on our emotions. He's as present in your silence as He is in your song. He's as near in the valley as He is on the mountaintop. When you can't feel Him, He's still holding you. When you can't hear Him, He's still speaking. When you can't see the path, He's still leading. Remember Elijah, the prophet who called down fire from heaven. After his greatest victory, he found himself in a cave, afraid and weary, saying, "It is enough, Lord." He had nothing left. But God didn't scold him. He didn't lecture him. Instead, He met him gently. There was a strong wind, an earthquake, and fire, but God wasn't in those. He was in the still, small voice. Sometimes that's all we need, not a sign, not a miracle, but just a whisper from heaven reminding us, "I'm still here. You can't, but I still can." We tend to forget that the greatest miracles often come through the most painful processes. Joseph was betrayed, forgotten, and imprisoned before he was exalted. David was hunted and hated before he was crowned. Jesus himself broken and crucified before the resurrection. Every great story of faith has one thing in common: a moment when it looked like all was lost. But that's the place where God does His greatest work. You may not understand what God is doing right now, and that's okay. You don't have to. Faith isn't about understanding everything. It's about trusting Him through everything. The same hands that shaped the stars are shaping your story. The same voice that spoke creation into existence is speaking life into your situation. You might not see it yet, but He's working all things together for good. There's a peace that comes when you stop trying to figure it out and simply rest in Him. When you say, "God, I don't know how, I don't know when, but I trust You anyway." That's the moment heaven moves. That's when chains break, when fear loses its power, when miracles are born. Because it's never been about your strength, it's always been about His. Sometimes we think God is late, but He's always right on time. He waited until Sarah was too old, until Lazarus was too dead, until the wine had completely run out at the wedding. Why? Because He wanted everyone to know that it wasn't human effort, it was divine power. If you're waiting, you're in the perfect position for a miracle. When everything is beyond your control, that's when His control takes over. The journey of faith is not about avoiding weakness, it's about embracing it. The Apostle Paul said, "When I am weak, then I am strong." It sounds backward to human logic, but that's the kingdom principle. Strength isn't found in pretending to have it all together. It's found in admitting that you don't, and letting God fill the gap. He doesn't just meet you halfway, He carries you the whole way. Even in your deepest valley, His hand is still upon you. Even in your most painful night, His light still shines. You may have run out of strength, but He has not run out of mercy. You may feel like giving up, but He has not given up on you. The same God who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. Every time you whisper, "Lord, I can't," remember that it's not the end of your prayer. It's the beginning of His power. He is still the God who moves mountains, still the healer of broken hearts, still the lifter of weary souls. And even when you can't see a way, He still can make one, because that's who He is, and that's what He does. There are seasons when life feels like walking through fire. Every step burns, every breath hurts, and you wonder if you'll ever come out on the other side. But the truth is, even in the fire, God is with you. Just like He was with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He doesn't always take you out of the flames immediately. Sometimes He steps into them with you. The miracle wasn't that they avoided the fire, it was that they walked through it and came out without even smelling like smoke. That's what happens when God is in the middle of your trial. What should destroy you ends up refining you. When you feel forgotten, when it seems like everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck in the same place, remember that God's timing is not your timing. He is not slow, He is strategic. He is aligning details, preparing hearts, and opening doors you can't yet see. The silence of God is never the absence of God. Sometimes he's simply working in ways that require quiet. Every delay carries purpose. Every detour holds a lesson. When you can't see it now, you will thank him later. God's strength doesn't just lift you when you fall. It sustains you while you wait. There's a peace that comes when you realize you don't have to control everything. The weight that was crushing you begins to lift because you finally understand it was never yours to carry. You were never meant to be your own savior. You were never designed to handle life without his help. The moment you stop trying to be enough and allow him to be your everything, that's when rest comes. Even when the storm rages and the waves crash around you, remember. The same Jesus who walked on water still walks on top of every storm. What's over your head is still under his feet. He has never lost control, never been surprised, never been defeated. You might feel small, powerless, and afraid, but that's where his greatness shines brightest. Because when you can't, when you have nothing left, no strength, no plan, no way, he still can, he still will, and he never fails. So when life pushes you to your breaking point, when every door slams shut and your strength is gone, remember this: God has never asked you to do the impossible. He's only asked you to trust the one who can. Your weakness is not your end, it's his invitation to begin. The hands that formed the heavens are the same hands holding you now. Even when you can't see the way, he is still the way. Even when you can't feel hope, he is still hope. And even when you can't, he still can, always has, always will, forever faithful.